Because it's been busy.
Yeah.
Though I would just say the water group, the HB 5006 group, went for 4.5 hours yesterday.
Oh my.
There was a 30-minute break for lunch, but I had a call. I just got off this morning with the director of the Oregon Water Resource Department.
Yeah.
So seeing Mr. Linder's background is very appropriate. Seeing my background is appropriate. So we're in that game. I've got a report. I don't know whether I can give it briefly now. What I'm looking to do is to work with the other district chairs at AOC to get common concerns, a list of common concerns, and then to really shift our relationship with the state so that we become honored partners instead of somebody to be discarded or avoided or evaded or whatever. You know, pick the easy stuff.
Yeah, good luck. Sounds like a great. No, I agree with you. I think that's a very worthy endeavor, and we'll support you in that every way possible.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. You know, might as well try.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
So I'm turning my video off. I seem not to have service here. So just letting you guys know I'm still here.
Okay. Yeah, you're breaking up there, Courtney. I was just your audio.
Yeah, I'm turning off all
Is
my.
that better?
Yeah, turning off all my extra applications.
Okay.
And do we know if Commissioner Webb will be joining us?
Yes,
I have not heard otherwise.
Chair Quayla, Commissioner Webb will be joining us. She thought this was a hybrid meeting, and so she was going back to get on her computer. So,
Okay, gotcha. All right, well, we've got everybody except for Commissioner Webb, who will be joining us very shortly. We'll go ahead and get started. I got 10 o'clock. So work sessions are an opportunity for board members to discuss issues informally with staff and invited guests. The board encourages members of the public to attend work sessions and listen to the discussion, but there is generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regularly scheduled meetings. First topic is the county manager update. I'll turn it over to our county manager, John Boone.
thank you, Chair Quayla, members of the board. I really will not have a long update this morning. We have a full agenda, so in deference to that, I'll be really quick. This afternoon, Commissioner Thompson, staff, CBH, and some ODOT representatives will be meeting to talk about the Astoria-Megler Bridge and some of the issues that have presented themselves just over time regarding mental health issues and the access to the bridge. So we're just going to be talking about that as a first discussion. Your board had sent a letter to ODOT regarding that topic. And so the first meeting will be happening today. As well, Senator Merkley's staff will be here this afternoon just to talk about emergency preparedness and resiliency and how the federal government might be instructive as we prepare. So that's all that I have, Chair Quayla. Thank you.
Thank you, County Manager. Do we know how many commissioners are planning to attend the EPIRB meeting? EPREP, I mean, I guess
Yeah,
I am as well. So just want to make sure we don't have a quorum at that.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Commissioner. We will check. So.
Okay. It looks like Commissioner Thompson and myself, so that would be
Yeah.
fine. Okay.
Thank you.
Next item is the proposed methodology to establish limits on short-term rental units. We have 45 minutes set aside for this. It's on page 3 of our agenda, and I'll turn it over to our Community Development Director, Gail Hendrickson.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Board. We're here today because of some direction that you provided to staff back on June 22nd. And that direction, as staff understood it, was basically to complete 2 tasks. One was to develop a time frame to establish a process and for establishing caps in certain areas of unincorporated Clatsop County on the number of short-term rentals. And the other was to continue to review the operating standards that we use to identify where code compliance could make some enhancements to continue to address quality of life issues. When we talk about quality of life, short-term rentals are really one coin with 2 sides. And so we have quality of life issues where we know that short-term rentals can increase traffic, they can increase demands on water and septic systems, depending upon the occupancy that's licensed. And, they can also generate additional noise or potentially more solid waste than you might find with a standard single family home. On the other side of that coin, though, there is also a realization that tourism is a very important part of our economy, and that short-term rentals can provide access to places where people typically wouldn't have access. They provide an additional lodging choice for people. They do provide income for an property owner, and they do generate tax revenue for the county. So with the task that was assigned to staff, we pulled together very specific information, and this became the basis of the initial recommendations that we're presenting this morning. Probably the biggest part of that foundation was a report that was published in 2017 called Assessing and Responding to Short-Term Rentals in Oregon. And that was published by the University of Oregon Department of Planning, Public Policy, and Management. We also conducted an initial survey of peer jurisdictions. We relied heavily on mapping information from our GIS department. We tapped into code compliance for their complaint matrix, and we did also pull some information from the housing data report that staff prepared for your board on May 18th. So to talk just briefly about the University of Oregon report, I want to talk about some of the recommendations and then some of the limitations of the report. So the recommendations basically stated that when you reach a threshold where STRs are more than 4% of your housing stock, you should consider as a jurisdiction utilizing caps or finding ways to incentivize people to use their STR less. It also recommended revoking permits when a specific STR has reached 5 complaints or more in a calendar year. And then it also talked about this idea of imposing buffers or distances between short-term rentals. And it said, really, first, you should look at your operating standards before you went down the path of imposing buffers. But if you did go down that path and put distance requirements in place, you wanted to do it to try and deconcentrate the complaints that you're getting, and that you should look at it every 2 to 5 years. So we took a lot of these recommendations as staff, incorporated them into what became our initial recommendations that we'll talk about in just a moment. But I do want to point out some of the limitations of the study as well. So we know that, this is not the be all and end all of short-term rentals in Oregon. First of all, we know the report is 5 years old, and obviously it was drafted pre-pandemic, and everything in the universe has shifted 5 degrees since 2020. So we need to take the study with a grain of salt here. The study also focused on cities and didn't talk at all about unincorporated or rural areas. So there is a caveat there. And it was really geared in many ways to encouraging jurisdictions that had not yet even developed operating standards or taxation standards for short-term rentals to really begin to go down that path. So there are, as I said, some limitations to this, but it was the best information that we could find, and it was also utilized and recommended by the city of North Bend, which used it as the foundation for their caps on short-term rentals that we'll also see in a minute. And then to talk briefly about the peer jurisdictions that we reviewed, we had some selection criteria, which included how prevalent tourism was in the local economy, how close it was to the coast, and then we also received some additional recommendations from legal counsel and from planning directors around the state who pointed out other jurisdictions we might want to include in our survey. And so we looked at 7 different counties and several different cities, including all of the cities within Clatsop County, and then including Manzanita, Durango, Colorado, North Bend, Port Townsend, Washington, and South Lake Tahoe, California. What we found from that initial peer survey was that most of the jurisdictions we looked at don't put a percentage or a static number cap on short-term rentals. The exceptions that we found were North Bend, which caps it at 2% of their total housing stock, or a total of 64 short-term rental units within the entire city. Manzanita has a 17.5% cap on dwelling units within specific zones. Durango, Colorado had a 3% cap within specific zones. And then the city of Seaside uses a combination of spatial distribution and density limits. And depending upon the zone that you're in, that could be anywhere from 30 to 50% of the units within an area. We did also find that many of the jurisdictions prohibit new STRs in residential zones and may also require owner occupancy if you have a short-term rental. So within Clatsop County, I think this map that our GIS staff put together speaks quite a bit about where the short-term rentals are. You can see that along the coast, the more densely distributed short-term rentals are the yellow and red areas, and you can see that it's Arch Cape, it's Cove Beach, and then it's the unincorporated Warrenton Gearhart areas. And as you get east of Highway 101, they tend to thin out in number quite a bit. So in terms of total numbers, we continue to refine our numbers, and so at point in time when this was prepared, we have 181 licensed short-term rentals, and that 76% of them, over 76% of them, are west of Highway 101, and that is approximately 138 short-term rentals. If you include everything west of 101 and all of Arch Cape, which straddles 101 and where the majority of short-term rentals are, it's a total of 149. And so this really became the basis of where we're going to talk about our recommendations. So we know that the majority of our short-term rentals are either on the west side of Highway 101 or on the east side in Arch Cape as well. We compared that to complaints, and over 85% of our complaints are coming from properties that are west of Highway 101 as well. So there's a correlation between where the density of short-term rentals is located and where the density of complaints is coming from. So to get to the part that everybody has been waiting for, the initial recommendations, I do want to point out that these are initial recommendations, that this is a starting place for your board to begin discussions and to begin giving feedback to staff. This is not a final recommendation by any means, and we do have some additional public participation that will need to occur before any of this becomes final, obviously. So in terms of the moratorium, considering that where we face the highest concentration of short-term rentals and where we face the highest concentration of complaints, we are recommending, or staff would recommend to your board, that in terms of the moratorium, that be lifted for properties that are east of Highway 101. The exclusion to that would be any property east of 101 that's zoned Arch Cape Rural Community Residential. And then we would recommend that you keep the moratorium in place for all of that Arch Cape zone and everything west of Highway 101. And then in terms of where caps could be imposed, what we are initially recommending as staff is that caps be considered for all residentially zoned properties west of Highway 101, and also for all of the Arch Cape zone. And then obviously that would include Arch Cape, Cove Beach, Surf Pines, and the Highlands areas. And then in terms of establishing a number on the amount of short-term rentals that could be allowed, there's several different ways that your board can approach this. One is to just look at what we currently have licensed now and just say, that's it, that's the limit. You could also look at taking a percentage within each zone of the total housing stock and creating a percentage cap. You can also look at creating a separation between existing STRs and new short-term rentals. And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing strategy. These can be combined. You can take some of them, all of them. You can ask staff to go back and see if there's an additional way that could be considered in terms of establishing a cap. But these are just three of the most common ways that your board could approach this. And then we, as staff, would also recommend the board consider some changes to our permitting process. In April, your board approved Ordinance 2203 that changed the permit length from 5 years to 2 years. We would recommend another decrease and go from 2 years to 1 year. Another option for your board to consider would be to look at our fee structure. Right now, it's $550 for a 2-year permit. One thing that staff found in our peer survey is that some jurisdictions charge less for a permit if the unit is owner or manager occupied versus if there is an absentee landlord or property owner. And so one thing that the board could consider is for short-term rentals that are owner or manager occupied, we keep that fee at $550. But if it's a property owner who's not living on site, then it would be increased to $1,000 fee. And so with that extra money, we could potentially use that additional fee for non-owner occupied short-term rentals to fund a part-time code compliance specialist who would be dedicated to doing nothing but monitoring and working with short-term rentals and complaints about short-term rentals. And so just to put my math on the table here, if our fee went up to $1,000, we would collect an extra $450. Assuming 150 short-term rentals are not owner occupied, that would equate to $67,500 of income in a year. And Budget and Finance estimated that the annual cost, approximately including salary and benefits for a part-time code compliance specialist, would be about $58,000. So it is possible that that could pencil out for the county. And then finally, to talk about some operating standard changes, we pulled a lot of this from our peer survey, and some of it is actually being done by vacation rental companies such as Airbnb now, such as not allowing parties or events at short-term rental units. We would also ask the board to consider restricting hot tub or swimming pool use during the evening hours when we have quiet hours established countywide, and those are from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Obviously, we'd want to have annual inspections if we go to a 1-year license. And then we would also want to have code compliance sign off on those to make sure that there's no outstanding code violations. Again, prohibit events or non-paying day guests at short-term rentals. So if I'm staying at a short-term rental, I can't invite all my friends over for the day just to come and hang out. So trying to limit traffic and noise and trash generation at some of these short-term rental units. Looking at having only the primary house be considered a short-term rental and not the accessory dwelling unit. and then some additional language regarding unattended or unleashed pets, and even unleashed pets apparently. So if you haven't properly leased or rented your pet, you couldn't have it at a short-term rental. And then one thing that we found, I think it was the jurisdiction of South Lake Tahoe, that does allow their department director to immediately revoke a license after 3 certified violations. Right now, only the public health director or the building official can immediately revoke a license, and those are for very specific health reasons. So that would just be an additional tool that we could have in our box if there was some additional language that would allow the director of the department to make that decision as well. We would also want to consider prohibiting boat, trailer, and RV parking within public rights of way, and having all these operating standards apply to all SDRs, including those in Arch Cape. All right, and then for the time frame and public input part that the board asked for, we put together a pretty accelerated time frame for this project. We're here today asking your board for additional direction. Depending upon the direction that you give us, we would then open the public participation period tomorrow and run that through September 5th. And included in that public comment period on August 6th, which is this coming Saturday at 10 a.m., we would have a virtual public meeting to put these ideas forward to the public and get their feedback. We would hold a second one on August 17th at 6 p.m. And then bring those comments back to you along with any comments submitted online to your board on September 21st at another work session to go over that input. And then depending on what would happen on September 21st, staff would then prepare an ordinance for adoption, and we would anticipate that coming before your board on October 12th and 26th for 2 public hearings. And then on October 26th, we could also rescind the moratorium for areas west of Highway 101. So today, staff has 5 questions for your board that we really need your direction on. The first being, does your board still even want to consider moving forward with caps? If not, we have a very shortened work session and everybody will go back on to the next topic. But if you do want to continue moving forward with this, what staff needs to know then is, how do you want to go about establishing a cap? Do you want to just look at a static number that caps it at maybe where it is now or some different number, or do you want to look at a percentage of housing stock or some combination of both? And then a second question would be whether or not your board would want to grandfather in all existing short-term rentals, or if it would just immediately apply as our short-term rental permits begin to expire in 2023. Then the other questions would be, should there be a distance requirement between an existing short-term rental and a new one? And is your board in agreement with the proposed public involvement plan and the schedule that we've proposed? And I covered that very quickly, and I just wanted to give lots of time for your board to have discussion, but I am here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Community Development Director Hendrickson. Appreciate your research and thoughtful approach to this. I think we'll go through and get some general impressions. And also, did you want input on the operating standards that you proposed?
Yes, that would be helpful as well, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and start with Commissioner Banks and then Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Banks.
So I'm gonna start the conversation with the question regarding caps. Yes, I do believe I would like us to continue pursuing caps. In regards to the second one, of whether or not properties should be grandfathered in, I do believe properties should be grandfathered in no matter what our cap level is that we develop, mainly because I don't want to be in a position of choosing winners and losers in regards to who gets to keep their short-term rental and who doesn't. I would like all current short-term rental owners to have the ability to follow the rules and operate, with the concession that when they sell their property, that their short-term rental permit does not roll over to the new purchaser, that that new purchaser, if we have not reached the cap in the area, has to apply for their own new short-term rental permit. And then in just regards to whether or not we go by a percent or by a cluster or however we measure that, I have a question for you, Director Hendrickson, is what avenue would reduce or have the least amount of impact on staffing hours?
Off the top of my head, I would say that just capping the number where we are currently at would probably be the easiest. As we begin to become more fine-grained and we start looking at individual zones, that will add time to staff work to continue to monitor each of these different zones to make sure that we haven't exceeded a cap in any one place.
Okay, because I will circle back, and as I'm discussing this with the rest of the commissioners here, that we can't treat individual communities as special entities because we don't have the staffing capacity in order to do so. And so that is part of the thing that, you know, I'm just going to circle back to something that I said in the very beginning of this conversation, is that we need to streamline this to a point where we are not exceeding our staffing capacity, because then we're having to look at, you know, adding FTE and so on and so forth. And we're just not, as a community and you know, managing in unincorporated areas, we're not built as a municipality. And so I'll just circle back to let's try to do this as easily as possible. And then I'll let other commissioners speak before I speak about the new rules and regulations.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you. I'm heading along the same path as Commissioner Bangs. What we're looking at, first of all, we have a community development director. This is not just a planning director. It is a community development director. Our code enforcement officer is called code compliance. In my mind, what we're looking for is development of communities, which means a community of good neighbors. Anything we do should be geared to that. It should have that sensibility in mind. As Commissioner Bangs said, county taxpayers, she said built, I would say funded. The county structure is not funded to require urban service levels, to support those urban service levels. So if I had been talking to the community development director, I would have said, look, we don't have any studies related to counties. That's a tell. Nobody has been able to do this for counties effectively. People would point to Lincoln County. Well, Lincoln County's wrapped up in court and LUBA. So no counties have done this. I don't think it's a county function to go further than establishing caps. If we look at Surf Pines, and I have a dear friend in Surf Pines who really has, you know, touched my heart with her concerns about the activities around her. An HOA exists as a legal entity for which those homeowners pay and hold themselves accountable to have the authority to regulate this activity. They haven't been able to effectively regulate this activity, so they want to push it over onto the county. Well, I don't think that's reasonable. I don't think it's legal. I don't think it's fair to the rest of the Clatsop County taxpayers. And we could have special districts. We could have newly incorporated cities. In Arch Cape, we've tried to kind of half-step things for almost 2 decades, because they do have a sewer, because they do have a water system. And we've had Arch Cape design review. No, that didn't work. Now we have special standards in Arch Cape. It's quasi, it's almost a city, but not quite. I think we should be clear and fair and legal about this, because it's fair to the county taxpayers in every jurisdiction that the appropriate legal jurisdictions in place. That's one thing. Validated complaints only. So I would ask that when the commissioners receive reports, we only receive reports of validated complaints. I think the data are skewed. I wonder, an owner living part-time or full-time on site, is that ADUs in effect? I mean, because I have neighbors, I have 3 that I think of who live part-time in their residence, that they also rent out the whole thing periodically. So I'm not sure whether we're talking about ADUs or something else. I'm also concerned about behavioral standards. When I look at the difficulties we see, the county manager reminds me that we are not the rulers of the universe. We don't have the legal authority to regulate the behavior of second homeowners or full-time residents who behave badly. I'm very uncomfortable with saying, here's a class of people that we can demonize, call the problem, the short-term renters. I don't think that works toward the establishing of good neighbor relationships. We have population trends. We are going to have more and more people coming to Oregon. We have a wealth gap that is growing every single day. There are very few people who can afford to own homes, particularly in my beautiful neighborhood. So rather than demonize people for coming, let's help everybody behave well to each other. And just a question, thank you, I have my comments written down. A question, if we set a cap at 5%, how many homes would that be throughout Clatsop County? Because I've heard from several people who say, you know what, in good faith, I have either bought or begun renovations to be able to do short-term rental as well as living in my home. So I want to know, when we set a cap, I want some flexibility. I think we ought to grandfather everybody who's there now, given the increasing pressures that are part of life in Oregon today. I think we have to look at our capacity to grow flexibly and responsibly. So I'm looking at all those things. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Before I go back to Commissioner Bangs, do Commissioner Webb or Commissioner Toyoka want to weigh in? Just in kind of initial impressions. Commissioner Toyoka.
Thank you, Commissioner Quila. Yeah, I'm in agreement with the majority of what my fellow commissioners have said. On the as far as code enforcement, I would argue that the math is a little different. I don't know if I agree to the $1,000 for non-occupied or $500. It should be one standard fee. But if we go to annual fees and allow that time for a code enforcement officer, I would argue the math is a little different than put forth, because if you were charging every 5 years and now to every 2 years, if we go to an annual fee, there's a lot more money in the coffer than just a differential. So I think the math to fund a individual code compliance officer, code compliance person, full-time only, to look at these issues would be easily funded. And majority of the complaints that I've read are about conduct, not about anything else, about capacity. It's more about conduct. And like Commissioner Thompson said, if they were verified, if I have to register a complaint by name, be accountable for my complaint that we could follow up on, and then that can be verified and addressed, that would apply strength to the system. The anonymous or random calls, I think, should not be addressed. But like I said, again, looking at all the letters from the individuals across county, it's more about behavioral issues that they have with short-term rentals than anything else. I haven't seen much. There's been a few about capacity and water and sewer, but again, it's all about code compliance for me, from what I'm reading. We can go into some of the others, but I'll pass it off to Commissioner Bangs.
First, Commissioner Webb, did you have something you wanted to add? Commissioner Webb?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'd like to really thank the staff for the incredible package that they sent out to us this week. I realized that a lot of it we had seen before, but taken all together, it was really a wonderful way to take another look at what's happening here. I would like to clarify that there are other counties that are dealing with this issue. We're not the only ones. And we are now faced with what Lincoln County was faced with in terms of a citizen initiative. So even though it's been quite difficult there, I would like to caution that that once again, I've seen other counties that I think have dealt well with this issue. As always, of course, we're a rather unique place. We're 80% forests, and our populated area is an L-shaped is L-shaped where all of our citizens live. I'm a little saddened about the issue of behavior and code compliance being at the center of this discussion, because to me it's an element of community development. It's providing citizens with a place to live, which is a real community. And the number of the density of short-term rentals, which are in fact businesses, it has always made me uncomfortable that we are allowing a business use within our residential areas. These are often distant owners. They're people who don't necessarily interact commonly with their neighbors, and I'm not sure that provides for the kind of neighborhoods and communities that we want in our county. In general, I applaud the staff recommendations for the process that they'd like us to follow. I think it's a very accelerated process, and I honor that and applaud their efforts in that area. The issue of HOAs. When I moved to Clatsop County, I was quite surprised at the number of developments in unincorporated areas which had been allowed by the county to develop, which to me are kind of semi-towns, because they do have a governance structure, in fact, that is local. And many of those HOA communities are in fact responsible for the maintenance of their roads and a lot of other things that would ordinarily fall to a municipality. What I have heard from a lot of those folks is that they have very high standards in those communities for making changes to their CC&Rs. And I find it interesting that some of them are as high, have thresholds as high as 75%, which is something that usually in the state of Oregon we wouldn't allow for a municipality locally. So, these elite areas to me are kind of a little bit make me a little bit uncomfortable, and so I can certainly understand why those people have come to us to help them solve their concerns about STRs. And I think we need to honor that among those folks. I think I have said before that I'm not so concerned about the legal aspects that we'd be facing. Takings issues are complicated, but in terms of short-term rentals, they have held up. They have not, to my knowledge, been challenged successfully. I think they've been challenged, but they haven't been challenged successfully. I'd like to support staff's background information. The grandfathering in, I think I'm not sure I know exactly what that means, because especially if we go to a 1-year rental standard, licensing standard, then virtually nobody is grandfathered in forever. So I do have some questions about that. The distance requirement concerns me because there are many places in unincorporated Clatsop County where lots are 100 feet wide at least. So I'm not sure that the 100-foot issue resonates very well with me. The cap issue when it relates to density, I think, is another difficult one, because in unincorporated areas, we don't always have very good ways of assessing what a community is. So I'm a little bit nervous with that. And I do think that the distance requirement really does depend very much on what the local area is. Thank you for the public process proposal. I think it's a wonderful one. And I think that our operating standards can always be tweaked. And I do have also a question about the code compliance issues. Most of the complaints that we have gotten from citizens happen when our staff is not sitting at their desks. They're usually evening, nighttime issues. And so who do we involve in that code compliance issue? How difficult is it? Do we become increasingly reliant, for instance, on our rural law enforcement folks? I think it's a serious issue, and I don't think it's going to solve many of our problems, other than to perhaps, I think it's not something we can truly depend on. The other issue for me has to do, and this may sound minor, but not allowing people who are doing a rental to have friends come. I realize there's a huge difference between having a party where you invite all your friends from Portland to descend on the neighborhood and a situation like mine. I just took a week off to be with my son and his family farther south on the coast. I wasn't a paying customer. I'm just grandma. And I stayed with them for several days. And I certainly wouldn't want anybody faced with that situation to be non-compliant with our regulations. So thank you. I think that's my entry comment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Webb. Director Hendrickson, do you have any responses?
Yeah, just a couple. So Commissioner Thompson had asked what the percentage of, if we did 5% of all the structures in unincorporated county, and there are approximately 6,500 structures or dwellings in unincorporated county. So that would be 975 potential short-term rentals if we did a 5% cap countywide on our housing stock, compared to the 181 we have today. And then if I understood Commissioner Toyoka's comments correctly, you're looking to keep our permit fee at $550 and just go to an annual fee. Is that correct? Okay, so of that $550, community development for planning and code compliance, we collect $50 per permit for our work. So that would pencil out to $9,050 a year for 181 permits. So we wouldn't really be able to add an extra dedicated code compliance staff without increasing the fees. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Otherwise, that's all I had. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Hendrickson. Commissioner Banks.
Yeah, so we just recently placed that ordinance that I've been calling the Good Neighbor Ordinance. And I guess I'm just not interested quite yet in increasing regulations, just because we really haven't given a whole lot of time to the new regulations that we just put into place. I struggle with telling somebody that you can't quietly swim at night between the times of 10 and 7 if I'm not going to tell that landowner that they can't swim. So for me, I just want to be very careful that I'm not placing regulations on a person that could potentially be the landowner. If we're not going to ask a landowner to do that or place an ordinance for a landowner to do something, I hesitate to place ordinances on our visitors to do something that we wouldn't do to a property owner. So I'm just a little hesitant. I would like to wait a little bit more time before we increase regulations, just because we haven't given a whole lot of time to the new regulations that we have just put into place. If we see that something's out of control, then yeah, I think we could address it. But I'm not hearing that, I guess, yet. And maybe I'm just missing something. But I feel like we need to give it just a little bit more time to see if our current regulations that we just put into place are effective or not. I mean, I'm rather than throwing everything at the wall, I would like to ease into it until we can find a good balance. In regards to potentially opening ourselves up to lawsuits, I have a different perspective in regards to that, because I feel like if we knowingly open our county up to lawsuits, we are knowingly opening us up to fiscal loss in regards to how much lawsuits and staffing hours and staff time it takes to dedicate to any litigation. And so I have a different perspective. I just would prefer to be a little bit more fiscally responsible when addressing this issue, because I feel like our staff hours are valuable and our county taxpayer dollars are valuable. And so I just don't want to be too willy-nilly, I guess, looking into this. And then I had a question for Director Hendrickson. If we were going to go down the route of a percentage, would you want to do a county-wide percentage, or would you want to do it by zone or by area?
I don't know that staff per se has a preference. I can tell you that countywide, we're not seeing the problem. The problem is on the west side of Highway 101. And we know that there's a concentration of short-term rentals in specific zones where some of that percentage approaches 25 to 30%. And that's based on the existing number of dwelling units within that zone west of 101 and the number of short-term rentals that are in that same area. If we want to look at dispersing them throughout more of the west side of 101, you may want to look at a percentage by zone. It does not have to be 4%. We could look at a very different number. But if we were going to go a percentage route, that would be staff's recommendation. Go by zone.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of, what is going to be the least amount of staffing hours while also addressing this issue. And I also, when I'm thinking about the phrase grandfathering in, I'm thinking about, so this property owner owns this property. I'm not going to project who it is that owns it, or whether or not they're a corporation, or whether or not they're a local. I don't feel like I need to make projections like that to change the narrative. But my thought process is in regards to grandfathering is that they have a short-term rental permit, and I feel like they should be allowed to continually renew that short-term rental permit until it comes to a point where they can't maintain it under the current regulations. And I am amenable to, if you have 3 or 5 strikes against you, validated strikes against you that have been validated by staff, I feel like that is a point or a time where that person, they've lost their chance, I guess. And so then they no longer can have that short-term rental permit. But when I'm talking about grandfathering in, it's for me, it's that person is allowed to keep that short-term rental and keep renewing that permit as long as they are not a problem property. That's my perspective. And I don't know if that is other people's perspective. And I think that that's something that we need to probably talk about a little bit further. And then, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Go to Commissioner Thompson, and then afterwards, maybe the most expedient way is to just go question by question that Director Hendrickson poses to us and give some direction. So Commissioner Thompson.
Well, thank you, sir. Contrary to Commissioner Webb's experience, I know the renters in my neighborhood. I know the people who bought my old house and how they got a short-term rental license and then became opponents of that. So if they keep that license, they are counted as an active license, but they're not renting out, or so they say. I know people who, like my immediate next door neighbor who uses Vacasa, but who is devoted to my comfort and satisfaction with the operation of that house as a short-term rental. So even though it's neighbors, I know Carolyn Crawford, who puts on her gloves, friends and neighbors, and goes around the neighborhood and picks up pieces of trash so as to avoid problems in the neighborhood and be a good neighbor. So there's a whole different variety of licenses currently in operation. I don't want to see the licenses taken up. I'm going to pivot now and talk about the statistics we have, because the study cited by the community development director had Airbnb with pretty precise reservation statistics. Our county statistics on usage and understanding, we don't have the staffing to develop those highly refined statistics. If somebody rents once in a quarter, they're counted as renting 25% of the year. Once, twice. So they could conceivably rent 4 times a year and be counted as renting their facility 100% of the time. It's because of issues like this that I share with Commissioner Bangs the concern that the level of oversight required is appropriate to a municipal entity. If you don't like HOAs because you say 75% is too high a standard, well, they all agreed to it. And I really don't want to see the rest of the county taxpayers have to pay for what is a small group's problem. You can call them elite. An HOA is simply a legal arrangement. Doesn't mean that folks are elite. But if we are looking at elite, I'm looking at the day visitors and the short-term renters who cannot afford to live full-time in Clatsop County. Some of them would, some of them just want to come and visit. But as we're looking at the land use, as we're looking at the economy and property rights, we also, I think, should look at the third leg of that stool, which is equity. In Oregon, we say people have a right to come to the ocean. I remember when I came here in the early 80s, I remember driving late into the night because there was no place to stay. So my husband and myself and our 2 young children kept driving and driving and driving, and we stopped repeatedly to look for lodging. None was available. I'm telling you, the market for tourism overnight stays has evolved to meet consumer demand. So when we're looking at regulating, how much are we going into property rights? How much are we regulating the market economy? I would submit we should do that to the extent we can maintain neighborhood livability and no more. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. We will have an opportunity, if we agree to the proposed public input plan, we'll have opportunity to continue these discussions. And we do have a joint session with the Planning Commission scheduled for after this. I'd like to kind of move through all 5 of these questions and give the direction. Commissioner Banks, did you have something else that you wanted to add?
No, I was just gonna go through the 5 that I see in front of me.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and get started on it. So does the board want to continue moving forward with the establishing caps? And I think I heard from everybody that we do, correct? If so, should it be a static number or percentage of housing or both? What I heard from the community development director is that it should be by zone. If we wanted to establish something, a percentage, that it would be kind of tailored to where those zones are west of Highway 101, correct?
I'm amiable to that, and this is Commissioner Banks.
Okay.
Definitely by zone capacity.
Commissioner Thompson?
Well, I'm not so sure on this one. I want to see more data I want to see more data on this. I'm not ready to commit on that one yet.
Okay. Commissioner Webb?
Yes, I fully support this. I think the data is in our packet. It's right there. And so I feel very comfortable with that.
Yeah. And I think that the staff recommendation is a sound one. Should existing SDRs be grandfathered in?
This is Commissioner Banks. My answer is yes.
Yes. Commissioner Thompson, yes.
May I ask a question about this?
Yes.
Could our community development director explain precisely what grandfathering in means? Because folks would still have to come in annually or whatever we decide, right, to be sort of relicensed. So we're not. So is that clear? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I don't think county council is able to join us today, but my understanding, and I don't think grandfathering has a legal meaning behind it necessarily, but basically anybody who is licensed today continues to remain licensed. And then what we would need to look at and talk to county council about is if we're over whatever percentage limit we put in place and we grandfather everybody in, does that mean no new rentals until that existing number dwindles down, or would the new number be in addition to whoever is already grandfathered in? So I think that would need a little bit more refinement and discussion with county council before we could really answer that thoroughly.
Okay, thank you. That was my concern.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Webb, for that. And thank you for the clarification, Community Development Director. I do think, I mean, just as it stands, I would be in favor of grandfathering in, but maybe we need to have a little more context. Should there be a distance requirement between SDRs?
This is Commissioner Bangs. I'm kind of neutral on that. I lean towards not having a distance requirement because mainly my area, we are required at RA2, which is 2 acres. And so it's hard to, that one's a difficult one. I will cede that discussion to other commissioners.
So does this mean going forward? I mean, my concern about, to Commissioner Webb's point, the data is already in there about the percentages. Depending on how the grandfathering works, the percentages are impacted, Commissioner. That's my point. Also, the same thing with the distance requirement. The way we interpret this going forward should relate to who's grandfathered in and how. So all of those three play together in my mind.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Toyoka?
Thank you. And even if everything I've read here and where I don't even know where distance makes a difference. You could be concentrating short-term rentals, or you spread them out and potentially upset more people. So I haven't seen a benefit to it, keeping them to get clustered, separated. So I don't see why there should be a requirement for distance.
Thank you, Commissioner Tuoka. Commissioner Webb?
Yeah, thank you. I guess my overall concern about this entire process has been that we have concentrated in areas where we are hearing most from citizens, the areas close to the ocean, which are in greatest demand for STRs. And we haven't really taken a close look at the Route 26, 202, and 30 corridors in terms of potential. And I'm concerned that if we do go ahead with the west of 101 emphasis, that we're going to see a big increase in STRs east of 101. And I think we have to prepare for that ahead of time. There are many areas of the county where houses are a whole lot more than 100 feet. But as I say, I'm just concerned that we haven't given enough consideration of that. I recently heard from a citizen who talks about the idea of that in many areas, STRs are concentrated, and that's what a lot of community members are concerned about, that if you get 3 houses in a row on the beachfront, it becomes a problem. So in the so-called smaller, less dense communities, I think the 100-foot rule is a good one. But because it does mean that those units are not concentrated. And that seems to be what a lot of people are concerned about. So I think the 100-foot rule I would be in favor of west of 101 if we go with that, but I'm not sure that it's as relevant east of 101. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb. And just my comment is I don't have strong feelings about the distance requirement. For me, that this doesn't seem like something that we really need to pursue, but I can be persuaded otherwise as we go through this. Does the board agree to the proposed public input plan schedule? I certainly do. I think you did a great job, Community Development Director Hendrickson, in putting this together. And I think that, yes, it's an aggressive schedule, but I think a good one. Commissioner Banks.
So I think it's a great schedule, but I do want to put out a caveat to that statement. I would like it only to be the only discussion to be caps right now. Not that I'm not amiable to having other discussions regarding regulations and time and permit length and permit cost. I just feel like when we bring too many items to the table, the waters get muddied. And so I'm just thinking along the lines, let's address the caps. And then let's address permit length and cost, because that circles back then to the ordinance that we've already passed. But that's just my personal feelings. I just want to try to keep this focused so that it goes, like, we can be a little bit more efficient with our time.
Thank you, Commissioner Banks. Director Hendrickson, do you have any comment?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Any other comments, Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you, sir. I've been working along with some other county commissioners with Commissioner Hillock from Wallowa County. He's got this concept, recreation counties, which is Clatsop, Tillamook, Lincoln, Curry, Baker, Wallowa, and Hood River counties. There's apparently been some federal and state, USDA and state designation of those recreation counties as having that disproportionate impact, in that we have increasing housing prices and an increasing delta because the economy in these recreation areas produces jobs that pay so poorly that housing is less and less affordable. So the initiative is to get special consideration from the legislature for more money to support our housing needs and to have some impact with DLCD to impact our land use regulations. I don't know if that will continue, but we're talking about that among the county commissioners at AOC to try and see if we can get something collaboratively. That to me is tangential but related to this discussion, because neighborhood livability includes affordable available housing as well as the use of that housing for short-term rentals. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Do we have any other comments? And Gail, do you have what you need from our discussion here on next steps?
I think I do, Chair, and we'll be preparing items for our public meetings. And just to remind everyone, the first one will be this Saturday at 10 o'clock. There is a link on the meeting calendar on the county's website. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Hendrickson. And thank you, fellow commissioners. I think that was a good discussion of this next step in dealing with SDRs. We have a joint session. We have our planning commissioners that have been waiting patiently to hold our joint session addressing the commission bylaws. So we have some draft revisions on page 270 of our packet. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to, and I welcome Chair Farrar. Thank you for being here today. And I'll turn it over to our Community Development Director, Gail Hendrickson.
Okay, thank you again. So we have been working on revisions to the bylaws for about a year now, and we brought some changes back to your board initially when we worked on the statement of roles and responsibilities that we developed for the various boards in the county. And as part of that, we went through the bylaws, identified some areas where revisions should be made, including what cases are handled by the Planning Commission, whether there should be term limits, and more clearly defining roles and responsibilities for the chair, the vice chair, and staff, and identifying how many unexcused absences committee members could have. And trying to put those all into our code to create, or into our bylaws to create a list of best practices and clear expectations for our Planning Commission members. Since we brought that initial draft to the board, we took it then to the Planning Commission, who also recommended some changes, particularly to clarify how a term limit would operate and whether it constituted a lifetime ban once you completed your term limit, or if you could come back after a certain period of time. And we did add some language to say that, yes, if you have termed out and you take a year off, you are able to come back and apply again. We do recognize that it is very difficult to get volunteers sometimes to serve on our boards, and that Planning Commission is a very big commitment, and it requires a lot of time and effort with our agenda packages. And so we made those changes. We brought it back to the Planning Commission about 2 months ago for a further review. And we wanted to bring it back to our joint session simply because we've got 5 new members since this was initially looked at on our Planning Commission. And we wanted your board and the new Planning Commission and our existing Planning Commission members to have another opportunity to sit down, look at this, see if there's anything that staff may have overlooked or that you would like to have included, and just to have a dialogue, because we do want to have an ongoing dialogue between your board and the Planning Commission. So really, I'm here to answer any questions. I know that Chair Farrar had many comments and provided a lot of input on this draft, so he may have something that he may want to add as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hendrickson. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chair Farrar. You have some comments.
Thank you, Chair Quayla and County Commissioners, and Gail Hendrickson, our esteemed director, who I think has done a very good job on helping us get these bylaws in shape. And I guess where I am now is after you read something over and over as many times as I have, it starts sounding correct. And I have fewer questions now. We addressed this at the last Planning Commission meeting, And I had a few questions at that time, which I felt our community development director answered quite well. I do have a couple of points I'd like to make, and they'll be brief. A couple are very simple questions, and they're probably like a lot of my questions. There isn't a real sound good answer for some of them. And one of them is a simple matter that falls under, I'll try to give the right Article 2 membership, which goes into attendance as Section D, and it says members shall attend all meetings, period. And my question is, it may seem kind of silly, but when we talk about meetings, are we talking about the routine monthly meeting or any and all meetings? And I take it work sessions are not really meetings. Would you be able to comment one at a time on these things, Director Hendrickson? I know we don't have county council here today, so it may have to wait.
Okay, so the way I would read that is when you sign up for the Planning Commission, you are expected to attend all the meetings, the work sessions, and participate fully in the committee. Obviously, we know that life happens, we know that vacations happen, and we know that not everyone can attend every meeting every single time. And that's why we have language in there that says you have 3 excused absences. I think it's up to 2 unexcused absences. And so I think that is meant to cover that. If you feel that you should have more excused absences, if you feel that you can, for whatever reason, maybe only make 3 of the meetings every year and you should have 9 excused absences, then, you know, that's up for negotiation with the board and the Planning Commission.
Okay, well, my reply on that is that I think it's important for all the planning commissioners to attend as many meetings as they can. I do understand it's important to have those exceptions allowed. And this being one of the earlier meetings for the new commissioners, they may not be aware that attending work sessions is useful. It's important. It gives us all a background. And so I'm going to greatly encourage that, but I'll just mention that as a comment at our meeting next week to the commissioners. So I want to instill in the present commission a real feeling that we need to act as a commission together and to try to become knowledgeable on as many of these points as we can be. The only other comment I'll make, because we're running kind of long on this meeting anyway, is that it's nothing that can be rectified in the bylaws, but I must say that I find early in the bylaws article, I believe it's Article 2, scope of authority, and in item, I think it's been renumbered to 4 and number 3. They seem somewhat in conflict, and I'll just read the wording as it stands now. To make land use decisions on subdivisions, and stricken from that was variances and conditional uses. And then item 4 is to act as county's committee for citizen involvement. And I'll just say that my philosophy is the whole thing is citizen involvement. And that's what I really would like to encourage. And I just feel that by removing the consideration of conditional use applications, it has somewhat removed county residents from the more familiar process of attending a planning commission to take up those matters. And now goes before a hearings officer, which from my perspective is less well known by the general public and in some ways a little less friendly maybe, and that it's one person rather than the 7 commissioners who represent a broad range of citizens around the county. So that's my philosophy on it. And I realized that the only way that could be changed is by changing some of the, I guess it's an ordinance in LUDUC. And I just wanted to get that point out because I want everyone to know my philosophy on the importance of community participation and citizen involvement. And that's all I have. And I know I've kind of gone on and on. I appreciate you offering me a few minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Farrar. Director Hendrickson, did you have anything else you wanted to add at this time?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Starting with Commissioner Bangs. Commissioner Bangs, comment?
So I just wanted to make note that because I feel that it is important to have a diverse group of folks participate in the commission, the planning commission, that having that excused absence and having that that kind of window open allows folks that have jobs and are working in our workforce to be able to participate when otherwise they wouldn't be able to. And so I think one phrase I would just add to the conversation is it allows, for vacation, it allows for life to happen, but it also allows people to have jobs. So I just want to put that out there.
Agreed, Commissioner Bangs. I think people have to go to Alaska sometimes during the summer to fish, and there's a lot of other things that take people away from Clatsop County for periods of time. So it needs to be flexible. Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Commissioner Webb.
Yeah, thank you. I have several things, of course. This is an issue near and dear to my heart. I would like to see something in these bylaws about training for new members. I think land use planning in Oregon is a very complex issue based primarily on ORS and other regulations and a long history. For instance, there's presently a podcast going on OPB radio that gives a history of SB 100. And its evolution. And that's the sort of thing that I would encourage all planning commissioners and probably county commissioners to listen to at length. I think training is just enormously important. I understand from Director Hendrickson that LCDC periodically offers training for commissioners. And I think this is a requirement. I don't think that a citizen should come to any local government commission and not be interested in as much training as possible. So I'd like to see something in here about that, about the fact that maybe the county will assist commissioners in receiving training. I think this is going to be particularly important in the future because there are a lot of us old fogies who are admitting that SB 100 being a almost 50-year-old statute needs to have some changes happening. And I think that planning commissioners need to be aware of what's going on in the legislature and between legislative sessions about these things. So I really think that training is something that is extremely important. Secondly, in the copy of the new bylaws in Article 2, I am very concerned that this implies that the only thing in paragraph 3, that the only thing that is relevant are subdivisions to the deliberations of the Planning Commission. And whoa, I don't agree with that at all. I understand the hearings officer issues, and I'm a little sad about that because I think it's always worth actually getting input from the Planning Commission prior to a hearings officer's determinations. From what I see about Planning Commission meetings, subdivisions are not the only thing. Number 4, I think this should read to act as the county's committee for citizen involvement in land use issues. We have several other local county related advisory groups. And I don't think that arts funding and human services funding, et cetera, are things that we would ever ask the Planning Commission to weigh in on. So I don't look at them as the county's committee for citizen involvement. I look at them as the county's committee for citizen involvement in land use planning or land use issues. The other, I think also, I guess, consistent with my attitude about training, in new Article 5 under meetings, I think that that work sessions should be required and should count as meetings because they're important. And because a lot of deliberation and discussion happens at work sessions. And so I think they should be, attendance should be taken, et cetera. Somewhere, I don't know where it would be most appropriate, but I also think that I'd like to see something in it about issues that that the Planning Commission might take up that are referred to them by the County Commission. The STRs, for instance, this discussion over the past, how long has it been, Gail? 2 years or whatever. I would love to have had joint Planning Commission and County Commission meetings to talk about a lot of these issues. I think it's really, really important. So I'd like to see something about, and other issues as delegated or as requested by the Board of Commissioners. My last issue is Article 6. When we talk about, it appears to me that conflicts of interest are always extremely important on planning commissions. And especially in a small community like ours, where we tend to all know each other and know somebody who has a financial interest in some of our deliberations. But it concerns me that we seem to be discouraging abstentions. And I'm not sure I understand that. I think that in all deliberative bodies, yes, if you have a conflict of interest, you must declare it. And an abstention cannot substitute for a conflict of interest. But to me, to outright discourage abstentions, I don't know. I wish our attorney was here to talk about that, because it's just, there are just times when somebody doesn't want to vote, not because they've got some kind of a personal bias or interest, but just for other reasons. So anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb. Director Hendrickson, did you have any responses to some of the points that Commissioner Webb made?
I think the only point that I would want to talk about would be the abstention issue. And I agree, I wish County Council were here, but what I have always been instructed during my course of working with local governments is that you really shouldn't abstain from voting just because you don't want to make a decision, that you should be limiting your abstentions to times when you do have a conflict of interest, when you do have actual bias, and not just because you don't want to make a decision on a particular topic. And I would like to have County Council weigh in on that, but that's always what I have been instructed during my course of the course of my career.
Thank you, Director Hendrickson. And just for my benefit, so how many work sessions are there throughout the year?
Really, the only non-regular meeting work sessions we do are the ones that we've been doing with your board. Otherwise, we schedule time during our regular meeting to have just discussion items that are sometimes classified as work session, where we're just working on different code amendments. And that also raises a different point. With regard to Commissioner Webb's comment about just handling subdivisions, I will amend that section because the Planning Commission does do code amendments, comp plan amendments, map amendments, and works on the legislative type issues that go forward to your board. So thank you for bringing that to my attention.
And then is there a onboarding process for new planning commissioners?
There is. We worked with County Council last year to put the process together, and as our new members have been appointed, we've been scheduling orientations with them. The orientations, we tell people, will generally last from an hour to 2 hours, depending upon what they want to know and what questions they have. And we do offer as training by the state is made available. DLCD, Department of Land Conservation and Development, does a wonderful training for planning commissioners. And we do budget money every year and offer that to our planning commission members, but it is not mandatory at that point. But the onboarding is.
Okay, thank you, Director Hendrickson. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, sir. And I speak as someone who has, in fact, served on the Clatsop County Planning Commission. It's a noble calling. So congratulations to Planning Commission Chair Farrar. Heavy sits the crown, yes. And that training, yes, of course we did training. Of course we did training, and it was good. The other thing that we did when I was on the Planning Commission, which was, it wasn't quite 5 years, I think, but it was over 4, was we hewed very carefully toward what the law said. I've had some concerns because I've listened to some deliberations that have seemed to me much more geared toward, I would call it a proliferation of rhetoric and points of view that didn't include, you know, the legal scope of the Planning Commission. I think we've sorted that out to our mutual satisfaction. I hope so, because that's very important that we give credibility to the public process. We are a nation of laws, and you're a part of that. We're a part of that, the Planning Commission and the County Board of Commissioners. So we can have our passions, we can have our ideologies, but we are guided and informed in our actions by what the law says. And the chair has that calling to hold the middle ground, as Bruce Francis did so ably for so many years, so that we're listening to points of view, but distinguishing between rhetorical opinions and passion and what the law says. So when you're looking at being the conduit for public participation in whatever capacity, to make that essential distinction between passionate opinion, ideology, and the law, and you're the law folk. So I appreciate what you're doing. If there's any way that we can work together most productively, I'm eager to have that. I'm looking forward to serving together with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Toyoka.
Thank you. My notes are mostly on scope of authority as well. And I appreciate the remarks that have already been made. One on the Planning Commission's, what they're making instead of just decisions on subdivisions. That's been clarified by Director Hendrickson and Commissioner Webb. The direction on the committee for citizen involvement pertaining to land use issues. I think that's an important distinction because the most important thing that the Planning Commission does is they are a conduit for citizen involvement in these issues that allows the Planning Commission to advise the Board of Commissioners on issues, on policy. And I like the amendment that, it does satisfy that, says that to serve as an advisory board to and resource for the Board of Commissioners, exactly as that conduit from citizen involvement, Planning Commission to the Board of Commissioners. So I enjoyed that clarification. And as Director Hendrickson, addresses the issues, not just subdivisions, but the other functions of the Planning Commission and committee for citizen involvement pertaining to land use issues, I think that scope of authority is perfect then. As opposed to the membership issues, and the attendance, I'm in agreement with Commissioner Bangs and even Commissioner Quayla there about, there needs to be concessions made for, excused absences and that, because the diversity of your board, having members who are, contractors, land surveyors, fishermen, all walks of life have valuable input. And, when those jobs are working and it takes them out of town or takes them away and they can't make a meeting, does not diminish their knowledge, their background, and the diverse information they're bringing to the planning commission. I think that's essential. So having those ability to have excused absences is key. For the board of commissioners, we miss meetings as well because of life, because of work, because of other conditions. So I think we need to have that concession as well. Get to one last note. Oh, everything else was covered, so I'm good. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Toyoka. And I know that Commissioner Bangs texted me. She's having some battery issues, so she had to drop off of our work session. Would any of the other planning commissioners that have joined us, would you like to weigh in and comment? And Commissioner Linder?
Hey, good morning. I think most of my questions and concerns have been addressed either in our last planning commission meeting or today. I do have a similar concern to Mr. Farrar about the hearings officer process, but my understanding is that that's not really something that's has a flexibility built into it. So other than that, I think the rest of the changes and what we've talked about today, I do agree with. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Linder. I see Commissioner Powers had his hand up there as well.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the discussion today, so thank you for allowing us to participate. I only had one question, and that happens to do with I understand we serve at the pleasure of the Board of Commissioners. And in the article, I think it's Article 2, it talks about Article 3, yes. Commissioners may be removed at will. Does that mean, is it the board's intent that they could replace the entire planning commission at once? Or are they talking about, is the input strictly by individual member? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Powers. I believe that it gives the ability for the entire planning commission to be replaced. I think that has actually happened at one point in time. But that certainly hasn't been the practice of this commission. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. That's gracefully expressed. It's about a line of accountability. And the line of accountability, the authority resides in the elected members of the governing body. We're accountable directly to the voters. That gives us the responsibility and the authority to carry out our duties, which includes the appointment or the unappointment of individuals or a body. That's our discretion. That's our accountability. And what do we say? With the grace of God and the will of the voters, we proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. One question that I had heard kind of posed was whether or not the work session should be included in the number of meetings that the planning commissioners should be attending, and whether that's 2 in addition to the 12, I guess, monthly meetings. How does the commission feel about that, and about adding these 2 additional work sessions? And of course, it could be more or less, right, Commissioner, or right, Director Hendrickson, depending on what what the matters and cadence is for these meetings. But do we want to include those within this, or just leave it at the regular meetings that see Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, sir. Well, I think the work sessions are important, but I understand people can't necessarily make all of those. So as long as the sessions are recorded, I would find that an adequate substitute, because we don't pay for this. People have to make a living. If we have pensions, if we have inherited wealth, if we have trust funds, we may not have to make a living. Otherwise, people have to make a living. And I would be in favor of making more flexibility for those work sessions, with the clear understanding that members of the Planning Commission would avail themselves of those recordings and play catch up.
Yeah, I agree with you, Commissioner Thompson. Any other comments? Commissioner Linder?
Thank you. I would just kind of agree with Commissioner Thompson's comments. I think that, and I think Commissioner Banks as well, this is tough. You all know, because, you know, many of you are working and running businesses and doing things. And when you have meetings in the middle of the workday, there is not a lot of people that can just set aside a couple of hours in the middle of the day. And so, you know, obviously I'm here today and trying to juggle things around and make it work. But I know that there's going to be times where I'm not going to be able to attend. And so whether or not there's a requirement on the number of, you know, work sessions attended in addition to meetings, I guess I don't have a comment on that, but just to restate that it is difficult for people. And that's part of the reason that I think you'll find that on a lot of these boards, it's tough to find people to sign up for it, because they just, you know, a lot of people that I know just flat can't take several hours out of the workday. So anyways, thank you.
Yes, point well taken, Commissioner Linder. Commissioner Toyoka and then Commissioner Webb.
To Commissioner Linder's point is, you know, and I think we're all aware that when we have a planning session today, you know, we have a work session today. How many hours did each of us devote in study and reading and research prior to today? We didn't just walk in and open up a folder and say, okay, what are we doing today? You know, same with the Planning Commission. There's a depth of knowledge, there's a depth of research, there's a level of commitment that, you know, if a work session is not germane to the Planning Commission, they should not have to be there. And if there is information, they can catch up on the video recordings. There's already a large commitment made. I don't think we need to impose further commitment of time to our, you know, the people who are generously volunteering their time to help this community. So I am in favor of catching up via video and just, you know, not requiring additional sessions.
Thank you, Commissioner Toyoka. Commissioner Webb.
Thank you, Chair Quayla. Perhaps we need to take a look at the times that a lot of our planning, that the Planning Commission and some of our planning advisory groups, how their meetings are scheduled. You know, as a planner all of my life, I've attended many evening meetings and many Saturday meetings in an effort to get as broad a citizen participation as possible. And so perhaps that's something that we as the county can take a look at in terms of making sure that as many meetings, perhaps outside of the average workday, could be scheduled as well, of course, with our staff receiving comp time for those out of hours meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb. Any other, Chair Farrar, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Just quickly, I hope my original comment that brought up the issue about which meetings get counted didn't leave you with the impression that I'm some stringent person that makes requirements on everybody to show up for every meeting. I tend to make them because I am an old retired guy, but I understand that a lot of people have annual times when they're not in the area, such as our Commissioner Johnson goes fishing in Alaska. So I understand all that, and I think it's very important to allow people the flexibility of not attending either when they're not well or a family member they have to take care of, whatever the reason is. I just, and we do have the provision in there that it is ordinary procedure just to let either the chair know or the community development director or staff know that they won't be in attendance. And that's important just to make sure that we have a quorum for meetings. And I just brought it up because I want to encourage the other commissioners to really get into the job and take it seriously and try to attend as much as they can and take in as much as they can. So I think we're all in pretty much agreement on that point. That's the only thing I had to say. And again, I appreciate the time to speak with you on this matter.
Thank you, Chair Farrar. I think we are in agreement on that. Any other comments from either county or planning commissioners? Okay. And Gail, you don't have anything?
No, nothing. We'll make these revisions and bring them back to the Planning Commission in September so they can make a recommendation formally to your board, and then we'll move forward. Thank you.
Sounds great. Well, thank you everybody for joining the work session today. We don't have any other items on the agenda, so we'll go ahead and adjourn. Have a good rest of your Wednesday. Take care.